pop up the rankings. We're getting to the nitty and the gritty here now. It's a lot of Big Ten at the top, man. It's 4 Big Ten teams. It's tough to still consider
the first
Oregon one.
The first two are hard to argue with at this point. After that, especially those next two, I don't know.
Why?
Why? Because Texas has not beaten anybody in the top 25, and they lost by 2 touchdowns at home. Now, like, Georgia's really, really talented, and Georgia's defense was healthy and got after Quinn Ewers. But Georgia's a 2-loss team. Georgia just got blown out pretty much by Ole Miss. And then you got Penn State. The best thing Penn State has was a close loss at home to the number 2 team.
Yep.
Penn State doesn't have anything great on their resume beyond that. They struggle with Bowling Green. Like, I have a hard time going, yeah, that's the 4th best team in the country, but who are you going to put up there? Like, I could make a case for BYU based on resume. I think Tennessee's got a terrific defense, really good running back, but like, I don't know. This is where you kind of run into some obstacles here. I just have a hard time, like, Texas's resume. I'm a believer in the eye test a little with them because I was in Ann Arbor where they looked really good.
Yep.
But that's a 6-6 team they knocked around. No offense.
No offense taken.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But like, that's what we're going off of because there's nothing else. They beat Vandy, who's having a great year for Vandy, but they beat Vandy by 3 points. It's not like there's anything else. Like, I don't know what the win is you look at and go, yeah, that's why Texas is number 3.
Well, I guess, the rankings will matter once we finally get through conference championship games, or maybe even before conference championship games. You could make the case that, Indiana, who you're going to see in person because that's the big noon Fox
next
game
week
in
against
2 weeks
at Ohio State.
Right. And so let's just say if Indiana wins that game, they're going to Indianapolis to play most likely Oregon for the right to get that bye week in the college football playoff. But even if they have a near miss, I mean they're 11.
They're probably going to be 11-1.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. So that might actually be good enough. I mean,
I think it would be good enough without any great wins. Now, up till last week, they'd kind of got taken it to everybody they played. Last week they had their hands full with Michigan.
Oh, trust me, I stayed up till 2 a.m. in Munich thinking this is the one, and then it wasn't. But I hear you on that front for sure. But when you take a look at the brackets, the way it would be right now, we've created that right there. Indiana would get a home game. Alabama would go visit Bloomington. Ole Miss would go visit Happy Valley. Boise State would visit
Columbus. That's a rematch of last year's bowl game.
Right.
Ole Miss and Penn State.
Yeah, but Ohio State didn't, everybody kind of tapped out, right? I mean,
no, I'm saying like Ole Miss and Penn State played in a bowl game last year.
Oh, that's right. Ohio State
Miami,
lost
Ohio
to
State
Missouri
in the quarterfinal.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And then Tennessee would be hosting Notre Dame. And then Oregon, Texas, BYU, and Miami would be the ones that you're basing it right now. If they won their conference championship. I mean, the conference championships can actually knock people out, right? I mean, is it possible? Like, let's just say Colorado beats BYU. Would they give BYU an at-large? Would they do that?
I think they, if it was competitive, I think it's hard to knock BYU out of it with 12-1 when you have 2 very good wins already. Mm-hmm. People are having a hard time with BYU because BYU is preseason number 13 and they haven't been in the conference, not just in the overall.
Right.
And I think that's why it's being held against them. Look, I could make a case Boise State should be higher up. Like, Boise State has 1 loss, same as Texas. Their 1 loss was 3 points at the number 1 team in the country, right? They didn't get blown out. They lost by 3 points. They also have a win where they beat Washington State. And people can snicker about Washington State, but Washington State is ranked higher than anybody Texas beat. And they beat Washington State, who has a really good quarterback, John Mateer, and they beat Washington State by 3 touchdowns. I mean, I get it. People are going to look and go, well, yeah, they had their hands full with Nevada. Well, you know what? So did SMU. The rest of the schedule isn't great. It's certainly not of the SEC caliber, but they went to Oregon and almost beat Oregon.
So the Georgia is out? Is that what we're saying right here? Or
look,
what?
Georgia.
How does Georgia get back into this?
Georgia's going to play Tennessee this week.
Okay.
If they beat Tennessee, then Georgia's going to probably springboard into the top 8 at least. And, if Georgia wins out, whether they get to the SEC title game or not, if they're sitting there at 10-2 with the schedule they beat, their schedule is much better than their schedule. Alabama has a really good resume because they've beaten a bunch of teams in the top 25. They've beaten more than those first 5 combined.
So I guess let's just, walk through it a little bit here. Again, Bruce Feldman, we're going over the college football playoff rankings right now. It's tough to imagine there won't be 4 Big Ten teams, right? At this point in time.
Yeah.
That the conference let's just say Ohio State wins out with all due respect to Indiana. Indiana would still, unless they get totally blown out, right? I don't know how Indiana doesn't
they're
make
11-1.
I mean, Penn State's not going to lose the rest of the way either.
They shouldn't.
Right?
They shouldn't.
Right. Let's just say they don't. And then again, they would have the benefit of not having to play a college, a Big Ten championship game. They're in Ohio
4 teams
State.
who would have to fall quite a bit because keep in mind, Tennessee and Georgia are going to play this weekend.
So does that mean that let's say Georgia beats Tennessee, that would knock Tennessee out of competition here?
I don't know. Tennessee has a good win over Alabama.
And Alabama's sitting right there. So how many SEC teams do you think make it?
The one who I think has the best positioning right now, they're also the team that I think people in the SEC least want to play, is Ole Miss. So Ole Miss is sitting there. They have 2 really bad opponents remaining on their schedule. Ole Miss.
So they'll be 10-2.
Most likely 10-2.
Now, how do they make an SEC championship game?
Well, I think you got to see how this plays out with Tennessee. You got that game in College Station where number 3 Texas is playing number 15 Texas A&M, and this is the one I have a hard time wrapping my brain around. If Texas A&M wins at home and beats Texas, Texas is going to be most likely 10-2, no top 25 wins. Is a team like that going to get left out of the playoff? I really have my doubts that there's going to be a 10-2 SEC team that has, and I'm not entirely sure why, other than it was a playoff team last year when there was a 14 playoff and they beat Alabama. So I think in people's minds, including mine, but I'm not on the committee, obviously. I think there's the perception of the eyeball test. We're like, well, we think they're really good, and you don't unwrap it to be like, oh, but they got it taken to them and got handled by Georgia. If they lose another game, then all of a sudden it's just not a one-off. It's like 2 games where, because I don't feel like people look at Texas A&M like they're a powerhouse. Like Mike Elko's done a really good job in the first year, but they lost at home to Notre Dame. And you can say whatever you want about like what state, it was the first game for Elko at A&M. Notre Dame went in there with like a really inexperienced offensive line, and they ran the ball well when they needed to, and they won the game. And, they also lost handily at South Carolina. I'm not saying if they beat Texas, they shouldn't be in the playoff, because then that would be a big win. I think then it comes down to they would most likely be a 2-loss team, and Texas would be a 2-loss team, and they would have the head-to-head win. So I'm sure there's nothing more the Aggies would love than to knock Texas out of the playoff. But that's the kind of what-if discussion that I think people are rolling around their heads right now in November.
These are the next 3 weeks. Playing out next 4 weeks, right? Because the first weekend of December is when a lot of these conference championship games. But that shouldn't have. I mean, maybe the Big 12 does affect who gets. It
shouldn't. I don't think it should in the case of BYU, unless BYU stumbles along the way. Like if BYU is 12-1, I think again, just my 2 cents. I think there deserves to be 2 Big 12 teams in there.
How about Miami? They're safe, right? Miami.
Well, they've went out. They certainly, but like Miami loses in the ACC title game, I think Miami has a tougher argument if they lose 2 games. Like they obviously lost to Georgia Tech on the road, and then if they lose to the ACC title game, they only have 1 win of any note, which is over a top 25 Louisville team on the road. That's not a great run.
Then give me Army's chances. I mean, let's say Army beats Notre Dame. What happens?
Well, then Notre Dame is definitely out.
Right, but so then what happens?
I think then Army...
Can Army get in there?
Can Army get in over Boise State? I think that would be a significant win. We'll see.
Dude, if Army makes
that would be awesome.
a college football playoff, that would be unbelievable. Like the most old school.
Back in the days, no NIL, no transfer portal, yeah.
And making the first ever 12-team college football playoff I'm getting goosebumps.
What if they're undefeated though and they're left out? Is the cry going to be as loud as it was for Florida State last year?
It's up to Rich. No, seriously, I think it was up to people like that because. Like I felt like I was pretty vocal on the Florida State side. Now that was a 4-team playoff. This is a 12-team playoff. It's different. Again, what does it look like when they play Notre Dame? I don't want to say that's a playoff game because like it's easy for us to say all these games are elimination games when in reality, half of them probably aren't. That one, certainly would feel like it is.
Army, Notre Dame, and that's in a couple weeks, right?
Yeah, and keep in mind, Navy was undefeated and Notre Dame just absolutely clobbered them.
Well, let's see, man. Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku Channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.